Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pick Six podcast, where, like the red-white game, we are going to touch on a lot of subjects today.
But not tackle.
We probably won't tackle a ton until the second half of the podcast, much like
we'll bring the interns in to tackle the subjects.
We're here. So, a lot of touch, a little bit of tackle, a lot of questions probably will remain at the end of this podcast as well. I'm Evan Bland with Sam McKewon, Jimmy Watkins of the Omaha World-Herald, Pick Six podcast, post-spring game edition, coming to you on a kind of rainy and windy Tuesday. It's the end of spring. Spring has sprung for Nebraska, and here we are to kind of talk about what do you guys think of the spring game. I think that's kind of been one of the the topics of discussion here in the last few days. The format. What did you guys take away from that thing?
This is Jimmy's first.
It was my first. I think I wouldn't have wanted to pay to attend. I don't know what tickets we're going for, but if I was taking my kid in there to see Casey Thompson, Trey Palmer, and all the newfangled gadgets that Nebraska football was promising all spring, I didn't get to see much of that stuff. And I didn't get to really see football until the guys that no one had ever heard of went in the game. And, there's something to be said for being inside Memorial Stadium. It's a cool venue. It's a historic venue. If you're a Nebraska fan, you're probably just happy every time you step inside there, or sad more recently, but in spring we're happy. But yeah, I considered it from a viewership perspective a dud. I don't think that Nebraska cares about that. I don't think their goal was to put out an entertaining product. Clearly their goal was not to put out an entertaining product. But yeah, from a viewership perspective, shrug.
Yeah, I don't like the first half format. So they've done this 2 years in a row now, where they do they call it a thud, but it's not thud. It's just touch. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to do anything other than touch the guys. I would get rid of that. I just go to full tackle. Don't worry about it. You got guys at the end of the game that are getting tackled in the second half. Yant was in there a little bit in the second half. I'm not sure. Football gods aren't actually real. Sometimes we refer to them, but they're fictional. And so you're not going to get penalized by them if you tackle in the first half. Keep the green jerseys on the quarterbacks and all the rest. I mean, all the linemen were banging around and doing all the things they normally do. It would have been cool to see, the running backs have to finish some runs and the defense have to tackle them, because I think what happened was it made the pass game just hard to execute because you didn't have a run game to play off of. And I do think that if they'd been kind of running downhill at that defense, we might have seen a few things. We might have seen that offense kind of hum a little bit and maybe score a couple of touchdowns, which would have been cool. So I thought that's probably the thing that I would change about it. I understand why they play backups and reserves in the second half. Everybody kind of understands that. That's sort of spring game tradition. That's why we always used to have the Chris Butlers of the world or whatever make these big games, and so everybody knows that's going to happen. I just wish there had been a little bit more in the first half, and I wish Casey Thompson had gotten more of a couple of drives. I mean, his third drive was a 60-yard touchdown by Anthony Grant. By the way, Anthony Grant was down, but
exactly.
They didn't call it,
and half the defense thought he was down.
Yeah, and so he was. They didn't call it, and so Thompson didn't get an opportunity on that drive to throw a few more passes, and then they took him out. And I'm not sure, I think in that moment you have to have a nod to the fans. Go, hey, let's put him out there again. Let him throw a few more passes. Fans are here to see him. Logan Smothers got plenty of work. So did he need to throw 14 while Casey Thompson threw 4? Probably not.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
And we can talk about this a little bit more too, but I felt like it was an event where Nebraska didn't really know what it was. Like, is this a thing that you put on for 50,000 people that show up? And it didn't feel necessarily like that. Is this a thing that's just for the team? Like, is this just another workout, another practice where they get more reps? No, it wasn't really that. It was something a little different. Was this for the recruits? I mean, Nebraska had a ton of recruiting presence there, probably their biggest one, in years, really. Yes, it was.
But even then, you want it to be a sort of a spectator thing. You want the recruits to go, whoa, look at the play that guy made, right?
Right, and it was super vanilla. What did Frost say? It was dreadfully simple with the offense. And, that's in keeping with what they've done for years, kind of keep things shrouded and secretive and that sort of thing. But it just kind of felt like it didn't know what it was. And even just to your point, even in the game itself, it's like, well, okay, first half we'll do 2-hand touch or 1-hand touch, and then the second half we'll open it up to the bench and the reserves and see what happens. And so it kind of felt disjointed and a little like it just didn't know what it wanted to be.
I think the defense was a little bit more keyed up too. I think they came into it with more energy and more, you know what I mean? Like they had a little bit more juice, and I think it showed. And I think they wanted to win that game, and they did. And I think the impression that Nebraska's offense gave in the spring game was that they've got a lot of work to do, and that's probably true. But I think you have to think about the impression you want to give to fans. And the impression you want to give to fans is, hey, this thing's on track and it's looking good. I don't know that they gave that impression per se. So it'll be a long off season. I think 4.5 months. We've got to wait here. So it's going to be some time.
We talked for a couple weeks now about like the fact that we are finally going to lay eyes on some of these people and ideas that we've really just talked about throughout spring. Did you feel like you guys confirmed or questioned anything from what you had heard, or was the format such that it just, it didn't make much of a difference in your perception?
Yeah, it was tough to come away with any real takeaways, particularly with the offense, because some of that energy that Sam said the defense had, the offense had, I agree that the defense had more juice, but I think, one running back running over a linebacker can change that for you, right? Like those kind of plays can get you jacked up. You don't really get to have those plays. You don't get the opportunity to show how much juice you have unless you're an offensive lineman on the offensive side of the ball. But I mean, like, what takeaway could I possibly have from any of the first string guys? Like Anthony Grant, the play that we all saw from Anthony Grant, we were all excited about. Okay, they touched him down. I think he had another like check down catch that he took for a nice first down run.
That was a good play.
That was a good play.
I like that a lot.
But other than that, like Trey Palmer, 2 catches, 11 yards. That's not who that guy is going to be. I think it was the biggest catch of the day. The longest catch of the day was 34 yards. Monty Grimes, right? And even then, like, if you saw the replay, he was bobbling it, and Miles Farmer could have broken that pass up. Let's put it that way. I don't know. I guess the one takeaway I did have, and this is if you told me that the format would have been what it was, I wouldn't have been surprised by this. Logan Smothers didn't look great as a straight drop back passer, but that's not what this offense is supposed to be about. I think to some degree they had the straight drop backs to test the quarterbacks, test their ability to read the field, but that's not what the offense is going to be. The offense is going to be a pass game that's predicated off the run game. There's going to be a lot of play action. It's going to be the defense not knowing what's coming. That's the idea, is to keep the defense on their toes. The defense knew it was happening the entire game, and there was really no reason to key in on a run because it's 2-hand touch football. So, yeah, I don't know. As someone who had to write takeaways from that game after the game, it was difficult.
Yeah, what got confirmed? What did I take away? Well, you saw a couple of different pass concepts that I like, including that little running back drag route coming one side, the angle route coming the other side. I thought that was neat. I thought the push for the offensive line was decent. I thought they covered well in the back end. Isaac Gifford, I think, had a nice game. I thought he played well. Garrett Nelson looks to have retained his speed. The question with Garrett is actually not pass rush. I think Garrett was a decent pass rusher last year and will continue to be so, but whether you can put his hand in the ground and not create a situation where he gets kicked out. So what a lot of time he spent in the game was sort of as a wide 9. Like if you watched where they set him kind of in that Philadelphia Eagles wide 9 where he's kind of going around a tackle, and that's fine. If you're running the football, you can be out there, but what you're in risk for when you're that far out is the tackle's probably not going to kick you out. Like the tackle's going to come down, and he's going to, the tackle's going to come down on the inside linebacker, or the guard's going to climb up, or somebody's going to go up to a safety, and they're going to bring a tight end around, and they're going to what they call a wham block or a kick out block. Wham blocks are a little bit different, but kick him out, and then you got to crease because So he's gonna have to close down the edge well as a run blocker, as a run defender, set that edge well. That's going to be a challenge for Garrett at 265, or whatever he is. But I thought he played really well, and I, there's some certain effective parts. I don't know enough, and I need to talk to Shenander more about this. There's things going on in the sport of defense, the sport of football as it relates to defense, where defenses have figured out a way to put 6 guys in a box with that 7th being a leak, can go either way, and they're finding a way to stop the run, which is, I've got to watch more of what Wisconsin does and what Nebraska's been doing, because they pulled it off. Like they were able to successfully have 2 sort of endish guys or defensive tackles, 2 inside linebackers, a guy with his hand up, stand-up guy like Tanner, and a guy with his hand down like Nelson. That's 6, and then bring Doman in as a 7th to borrow in, and they're able to do it. And it's Wisconsin does it, Nebraska does it. Iowa has a more traditional system. They're 4-3. Michigan, if you looked at Michigan's defense last year, it was very similar to what Nebraska was doing, kind of spare parts all over. It's intriguing how they're able to do this, because I think defense has found an answer for some of the spread stuff, is they stay in these personnel packages that take away some of these spread things. That way that 3rd linebacker is more like an Isaac Gifford. So I want to watch the spring game again, and then watch Nebraska's defense again last year, and kind of figure out how they're able to put all that together, because the pictures looked pretty good, to be very honest with you. And you'd be surprised, because they're not lining up the fearsome foursome. This isn't the Sue, Crick, Pierre Allen, Barry Turner front 4 of 09.
Right.
It's not as good, but they're still managing to stop the run, which means I think defensive coaches have figured something out as to how they're going to do that. Because when I watch Nelson and Tanner out there, I'm like, well, look, if I'm a defense, I'm gonna bring my guard, I'm gonna bring my tackle down, and I'm gonna kick out Garrett Nelson, and we're gonna run the ball off tackle all day long until they stop it. So those are the things that my mind goes through, versus, well, Nelson's getting around the tackle. That's what I thought.
And the Nelson thing too, like, I feel like his next step. How many times last year did he sort of rush the passer maybe on a delay, and they passed it right over his head for a big game? And
Sure.
we saw that a number of times too. So like, as he's more experienced in the defense, knows when to drop, knows when to rush.
He looked legit.
Yeah, and
like, there were some things,
physically more
and
impressive
Damon
too.
Benning, who was working for BTN, did a good job of explaining that on one of his pass rushes, Nelson hit, he came at the right angle, but he was also able to dip his shoulder, and he dipped it under the arm of sort of Brant Banks, and other tackles will pick that up. But that's really hard to stop. Like, if you get a big man coming at you fast, and he's able to bring his shoulder down as he comes around your edge, it's very hard to block that. Mm-hmm. You have to have great athletes who get out, and then that athlete's got to be able to, he's got to get all the way out there, and then he's got to be able to stone you, and it's possible that Nelson develops into a really, really good pass rusher. Aiden Hutchinson, is a little bit bigger, and he was an elite pass rusher in part because of his effort. But it's still the conundrum of, okay, you can put that guy out there, but how do you stop the run? Like, how do you consistently keep that guy in the action, and how is he going to know when it's run versus pass? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So you can bolt that guy off the ball, and he can take himself out of a run play. So to me, that's going to be the bigger jigsaw puzzle. Is that I think Nebraska's got a pass defense now. They have a scheme, and they have enough players to where the picture looks pretty good. The run defense is the bigger question. And as that game went on, you saw some of the things that can happen. They don't have a lot of depth on the defensive line. The number 3 offensive line against the number 3 defensive line, that picture was not good. The defense, the front 7, the number 3 front 7 with Marquis Black and those young inside linebackers, that was not a good picture. I mean, the offense dominated them. Mm-hmm. We were just not paying much attention by that point, because everything had already, the starters were out. But it was notable to watch that those younger offensive linemen were deeper and healthier and more physical. And, Jalen Weaver and Marquis Black have a long way to go. A long way to go. A couple times Weaver didn't even really get down in a stance. Like, he was just kind of standing because they were going tempo.
He's a big dude. He's 6'9".
He is. It's very hard for a giant guy like that to be an interior lineman. But you just didn't love the picture as they got down into the lower groups of the defensive line. watching it again on TV, I'm like, they're really going to have to go to the transfer portal and get a couple other players because I don't think they can hold up in the run. That's the question. Can they hold up as a run defense? As a pass defense, they look pretty darn good.
I'll give you one other takeaway that I had too, and I thought Chubba Purdy looked really good. I mean, especially for a guy who had just come back that week from a foot injury. He practiced once or twice. I don't think it was settled that he would even play a few weeks out, and so he was out there. I thought his speed was better than maybe what I would have given him credit for before that. His knowledge of the system seemed to be on par with the other guys who got those spring reps. And so I think, I was thinking, Sam, like, when was the last time Nebraska had legitimate quarterback depth? I think you probably got to go back like 10 years, right? I mean, I don't think, whether it was Tommy Armstrong or whether it was Adrian Martinez, there just wasn't a lot of.
When Taylor, Tommy, and Ron
behind
Kellogg
there.
were there, I think that was legit. I mean, Taylor got hurt, and Tommy and Ron tag teamed it from there, and I thought that was a pretty good picture.
Okay.
Ron Kellogg was not a bad quarterback. I mean, he was decent. He won them a game,
which is rare.
He
for
won them the
Nebraska
game
backups.
at Penn State. And Penn State was not bad. Penn State was, I think, 7-5, 8-4.
Okay.
Ron won that game. So I would say that year, or, go back to 2010, and you had Taylor, and you had Zach Lee, and you had Cody Green, and they needed all three of them in the middle of that season. Remember, Taylor got hurt, then Zach comes in, then Zach got hurt, then Cody comes in, then Cody got a concussion, and then they had to bring in Rex Burkhead.
It's just, I just think
to run Wild Rex. Remember that at Iowa State?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
And then Taylor came in, he could barely move.
So I just think it's notable because, Nebraska's had 5 scholarship quarterbacks before. They did a few years ago. But, Purdy was a former 4-star kid. I thought, again, he looked the part on Saturday.
I thought he played okay.
And so,
you think he played okay, Jimmy?
I did.
Yeah, I thought he played all right.
If Nebraska...
Throw to A.J. Rollins was legit on the corner.
No, I thought it looked pretty good.
If Nebraska continues to run the quarterback, as it will, and if injuries occur, as they do, it just feels like there's not going to be that drop-off that maybe we've seen the last handful of years. I think
he got out of the pocket.
That's a notable
I thought that was good.
development.
I thought he looked all right. Casey Thompson's got a live arm, and they're going to have to find a way to make sure that he's, handling that. The best throw of the day was probably the first throw of the game, because if that is a bad throw, that's an interception for a touchdown.
Yeah, Pat's pick six.
That was a good throw.
I think it could have still been intercepted.
Well, I don't think Isaac Gifford...
It was a tight window.
Optically, it looked like it could have, but I think if Isaac had been able to get there, he would have. I think he got out there about as fast as he could, based on what was being asked of him on that play. Honestly, I think it was just a really good throw. Now, I don't know if it was a well-advised throw, but it was
kind of what I'm getting at there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, if that had been JoJo, maybe it is. But, Thompson made a calculated risk, and he threw a good pass. He's got a gun. He can throw the ball hard. He's just, we'll have to see more of it, and we'll have to see. But, on 3rd and long, I thought he did the right thing. He fired a 10-yard pass to Boer Kircher on 3rd and 21, which is exactly what you need to do. The one thing I think Whipple's going to tell him is, we're done freaking out about not scoring on every drive. I think there's going to be a mindset of don't turn the ball over. If we've got to punt, let's punt, get what we can, and let's get out of there. I think it's more of an NFL mindset. In the NFL, if it's 3rd and 21, the chances of you getting 3rd and 21 in the first quarter of a game, you don't even care. You get your 7, you take your draw, and you play field position. I think at times Nebraska football has been very focused on scoring on as many drives as humanly possible, and as a result, they tend to make mistakes. And so I think Whipple will teach them to take what they can get and stay on schedule. And so I thought that was a nice play, even though it was 3rd and long and they didn't get the first down.
And Casey Thompson spoke to that afterwards. He said the 2 things that he was tasked with were staying healthy and taking care of the ball. And so it didn't really faze him, or it didn't seem to anyway, that the offense had 1 touchdown in the first half. Yeah. Let's this will be kind of a fun exercise. So before the spring began, we did sort of a draft of coaches and transfers and all sorts of different characters that we thought maybe would be the biggest storylines or something that would intrigue us the most. let's look back through that, see how we did. Maybe you can kind of break down some of our earlier picks, Sam, or lay that out there. We'll see how we did.
So what I'll
and then
do
we get to our
is
teams.
we picked 10 guys each, and we picked I think we picked one new coach. Let's see here, 5 returners, 2 early enrollees, and 2 transfers. Does that equal 10?
Three transfers.
3 transfers.
Yep.
Okay. And so
So I think we picked 11 total. Yeah.
we picked 11. Okay. So we picked 11 guys. I will go through our first, second, third picks all together. So here are the first picks, and then we'll try to zip through this quickly. Evan had Casey Thompson. Jimmy had Garrett Nelson. Sam had Mark Whipple. What jumps out there? Nelson. I mean, that was a great spring game that he had.
I mean, not only the spring game, but just the story around Garrett Nelson right now is that he's the new heartbeat of the defense, right? He's the guy that everyone's looking to, and
He's the Chevy truck.
yeah, he's the new face of the defense. He was one of the first guys out there to talk during spring ball. Everyone else is talking about him as that kind of guy, talking about him maturing. He's no longer as silly. I think it would be a good word for it.
Wow.
He's taking it more seriously. He said himself, he's yelling less. There's less of that. I think that people associate football leadership with yelling. Like they see Ray Lewis, like everyone should be like that guy.
Yeah.
I think if you're not that guy, don't be that guy. And I think there was maybe a little bit of that with Garrett Nelson early on, thinking that, okay, I'm a football player. I got to be yell rah-rah guy.
Yeah.
And
He's still a rah-rah guy.
he still is. He still is. But he has said it himself. He's toned
channeling
it back.
Yeah,
He's done so intentionally because he realizes that he is in a different stage of leadership now.
He's
And
a
I think
little less
that's-
of a caricature.
I think that's important.
Right.
Like, look at this, I broke my thumb.
Yeah,
you know,
there's
that
not
kind of
enough.
thing.
There's less bro in him, and that's a good thing.
Mark Whipple talked to us, I think, 2 or 3 times. Impressed each time. Obviously, a really smart guy, kind of inside his head, still working through the process. Casey Thompson, certainly has it as a leader. I mean, he has a good presence after a
does.
game and all that. But
I think those are all hits. I mean,
he
first picks,
he commands your attention. Thompson does.
He does.
Yep.
He didn't say too much during his press conferences are kind of boring, and boring is
Yeah.
good.
But he's got
Kinda like
a
Adrian.
certain level of presence to him. Second round picks: Mickey Joseph for Evan. Jimmy goes Chuba Purdy. Sam goes Omar Brown. Omar Brown hardly played. Mickey Joseph, impressive.
Big winner.
He's always a treat to listen to talk with. Clearly resetting a culture in that room. I mean, just the standard that he's putting out there for players to meet, what players say about him, not to mention the off-the-field stuff, his presence as a recruiter. Trev Alberts on Saturday actually talked about how important Mickey Joseph has been in bringing back a lot of former players into the fold and sort of sparking that communication that hasn't always been great among a lot of the alums. So, yeah, I think he's been a major winner this spring.
Chuba Purdy didn't practice for much of spring, but he played in the spring game, and again, I think we agree that he did pretty well. Omar Brown hardly played. He was a deep reserve. I think he did appear in the spring game. Round 3 picks: Caleb Tanner for Evan, Trey Palmer for Jimmy, and for Sam, Xavier Betts. And Xavier Betts was one of the biggest stories of camp. I still think there's a chance that Xavier comes back. I think there's a real chance of that. The question is, he's got to decide he wants to do it, and then Scott Frost has to be okay with that. I still think that this offense is going to be better, a hell of a lot better if he's there. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to ask. Janaran Bonner coming in and hitting right away as a deep threat. I think you want to try to keep Trey Palmer in the slot if you can. And Omar Manning is a different player over the top than Xavier Betts, and so we'll see what happens there. On Trey Palmer. Interesting guy. Didn't do a lot in the spring game, but the reports about Trey Palmer is he's the real deal.
Didn't do a lot during the spring game. Doesn't say a lot. Kind of
he said a lot, but he didn't say a lot.
He puffs his chest out. He puffs his chest out, but he doesn't. He's pretty short-winded at the mic. I would describe Trey Palmer as the carrot in front of Nebraska fans' face right now. He's the tease. He's the guy that everyone says is going to be, this, that, and the other thing. He's this guy who can be a game breaker. We just haven't seen it yet, and we're still waiting to see it. So it's just like I'm excited to see what Trey Palmer can do. I felt that way at the beginning of the spring. Yeah. I still feel that way today. But both with him and Chuba Purdy, a lot of value going forward. So if we expand the draft going forward, I feel like my picks will get stronger.
Caleb Tanner was on that list too.
Yeah, we didn't.
He
hear
has an interesting relationship with Trey Palmer in the spring.
We didn't hear a ton about Caleb Tanner this spring, but like I feel like that's kind of because he's sort of a given in the defense. Like I don't know that he made a huge step forward, at least from what we heard, but like he's going to be a fixture opposite Garrett Nelson.
Yeah, they like him.
Not a huge storyline, but solid.
4th round picks: Anthony Grant for Evan, Logan Smothers for Jimmy, and Ethan Piper for Sam. Anthony Grant, yep, I like that picture. After the line, once he gets past the line of scrimmage, like the picture a lot.
Yep, shifty, speedy, in a room that's begging for somebody somewhere to become that feature guy. It seems like he has a chance to maybe do that with some of the skill set that he has.
Yeah.
So yeah, he definitely had a good spring. Took some strides.
He's got some speed downfield. Granted, he was down, but he outran everybody at the same time. I think he's got some great stuff going for him. Smothers, I think there's a place for Logan Smothers on this team, but simultaneously, they've got to figure out what that is, and I think they've got to be able to be flexible enough to develop plays for him that work for him. Because sitting in that pocket is not where he lives and breathes.
Yeah, he remains interesting to me because of the moving parts around him. And that means the new quarterbacks. He's the old face in the room with a bunch of new guys, and the offense is changing around him in a way that does not suit his style, like you said, Sam. So for his, obviously for Logan Smothers plans to be the starting quarterback in Nebraska one day. So how he develops, how he improves within the new system that they're running is interesting going forward. And like you said, how Nebraska adjust to him if they want, at least for this year, they want him to make an impact on the field. Yeah, they're going to have to kind of carve out a role for him.
Yeah, one of those drop back passes becomes a QB dart with a lead tackle block. That's a 25-yard play. There's things that Logan Smothers can do for this team. We will see. Ethan Piper battling Trent Hickson at center. It looks like Hickson's won that job or is very close to winning it. Piper was banged up for the spring game. Maybe he will compete at guard. 5th round picks was Henry Lutovsky for Evan, Jaden Gould for Jimmy, and Deshaun Singleton for me. Singleton had a strong camp. I think there was, and I've talked to a few people about it, there's a sense that there's still a lot to learn, but there's things that Singleton does really well that they're going to be able to use going forward. I would say that this season for Deshaun Singleton is probably going to be a Deontay Williams 2018 kind of season. I think you're probably going to see him play. I don't know that he's going to start. I think you've got Miles Farmer and maybe Marquis Buford and maybe Noah Pola-Gates. But Singleton, you give that guy a year, I think you're going to see that things go really well for him. He made a couple of flash moments in spring, I know. Lutovsky is in the mix.
Right. I thought maybe with some of the guys who are out, he would make more noise than he did this spring. I didn't hear his name a ton, but again, the O-line really didn't name drop many people at all. We just didn't hear that from Donovan Raiola or the players. I still think he can be an interior factor for them this fall, but again, I don't know that he publicly at least took that spring step forward that I thought he might.
Yeah, it looks like Jaden Gould's heading for a red shirt. I think he's probably the 5th or 6th safety at this point.
I was trying to think,
Farmer stays healthy and those other guys.
Who would we classify as having the best spring of the early enrollees? I don't think we heard a ton about Houseman,
which we will get to at the end. Yeah, I think Ernest Houseman.
Okay.
Or Grant. Grant is not a transfer. He's a junior college guy.
Right.
So, but Houseman of the freshmen, I think, would be the one. 6th round, Nash Hutmaker for Evan, Donovan Raiola for Jimmy, and for Sam, Ty Robinson. Well, I think Ty Robinson looked good in the spring game. Nash Hutmaker looked pretty good. He can push guys, that's for sure. He's strong.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of the theme for him was like he's got all the physical ability you want, the brute strength. You see him weightlifting and seeing those videos on social media. But I thought it was interesting that the coaches pretty much put out there that the key for him is translating all that into football moves, into football success. And so clearly with the depleted nature of the defensive line, he's going to get some chances barring additions down the road. But he took some steps forward too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Donovan Raiola, we heard from him, I think, once in camp. Players seem to like him. It's good to see him interact on the field before the game in a setting where he's clearly more at ease or more comfortable than he is with the media. Media does not seem to be his preferred mode of transportation.
Yeah, he kind of batted the one session that he did have. He kind of batted every question away that we asked. But I think no news is probably good news on that front. It's kind of most players are going to they're going to say good things about their new coach. I don't know if they're going to like him, but they're going to say good things about their new coach. The Donovan Raiola story arc will be defined by what happens this fall with the offensive line.
True enough. Next one. This is a good one for Evan. 7th round pick, Isaac Gifford for Evan. Jimmy, Kevin Williams, Sam, Brian Buschini. We'll start with Gifford. I thought he did some nice things in the spring game.
Yeah,
I think he's probably ahead at that nickel spot.
Sure, I mean,
don't you?
Kolarvik made the switch. Javen Wright was out, and Gifford had already sort of been trending in that spot late last year when Doman was out with the injury anyway. So yeah, I think he did nothing to quell the idea that he's that leader in the clubhouse for that nickel. Nebraska has said they may look at some of the other defensive backs depending on how the cornerback and the safety positions settle out. But yeah, I think Gifford continued to lay claim to being that lead guy at nickel. You had Williams.
Yeah, he had Kevin Williams, who was a number 2 left tackle behind Nori Nwili. And then I had Brian Buschini, who had some great punts and some mad punts. He's going to be enormously important to this team. I thought Kevin Williams looked all right.
I think he looked all right, too. I think that I anticipated hearing more name dropping from the offensive linemen like we were hearing from everyone else. They kind of kept it closer to the vest, so I don't think we have a great idea of what that line looks like, which is the way they want it, but I don't think that that's going to ease anyone's nerves because I don't think anyone felt great about it coming in. So, TBD yet again.
Next up for Evan, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. He didn't play.
No.
He was out in spring.
Yep.
So we don't have much to say there. Jimmy had Bryce Benhart, and I had Thomas Fedoni. Fedoni is out. He's a knee injury of some sort. I don't know when he's going to be back. Bryce Benhart looked the best of the offensive tackles who played. I will say that. He looked certainly better than Ezra Miller and certainly better than Brant Banks, Banks struggled at left tackle. On Saturday, I thought Benhart looked okay, and Garcia Castaneda didn't play.
Right.
We'll have to see what he looks like come training camp. Next on the list, for Evan, Javier Morton. For Jimmy, Victor Jones. For Sam, Ernest Houseman. We'll start with Houseman.
Yeah.
Houseman came in physically ready. I think they really liked the things that he was able to do early. Kind of saw him out there with the number 3s. So he was out there with Mekhi Bayer. Inside linebacker, obviously Nick Henrich and Edevan Maga Clements were the top 2 guys. And then you saw a group of different Maga Clements was playing a little bit with the 2s as well. And then you saw Houseman, Bayer, Malcolm. I think Malcolm played, all in that sort of group. Now you're going to get back Luke Reimer, who was hurt, and Garrett Snodgrass. Those are probably your top 3 inside backers, and it won't surprise me if they pursue a 4th, and it won't surprise me if Brandon Jennings is on that list. Jennings is the guy that was at Maryland last year, the 5-star. I think he was a 5-star guy or 4-star guy. He went to Kansas State, didn't work out at K-State. He was there this spring, and so he's back in the list.
We know there's a nifty little trade route between Manhattan and Lincoln.
There is. There is. That's right. So I think Houseman is a guy they love, and is probably going to play next year. I think on special teams or something like that. Victor Jones didn't see a lot of him. He's down the depth chart. I think they wanted to see what Hardy, Neville, and Grimes brought to the picture. And then Javier Morton was at corner. He's obviously not one of their top 4 corners at this point. Next list for Evan, Marquis Buford. That was a good late draft pick.
Yeah.
Jimmy had Chancellor Brewington, injured, didn't play. And then I had Tommy Hill.
Good one.
We'll start with the one at the top of the list there, Marquis Buford.
I was really impressed by Marquis Buford, and I think there was some question, at least publicly, going into the spring about where he was best suited at corner or safety, and they like him at safety, even though he's a little bit shorter there. But, man, I mean, physically he looks the part. The way he carries himself, I was really impressed with. Like, I think it's a fun exercise to project a year or 2 down the road and see, like, who's a potential captain or leader for these guys in the future. I think he checks all those boxes from what I've seen from him down the road. And the fact that he's in the running to be a starter this next year, I mean, he was a guy who was highly recruited out of high school, did the postgraduate route. He seems like someone who's ready to play right now.
Just the way Fisher talks about him too, right? Like all the things that Travis Fisher cares about. He puts those guys through, we've talked about this before, a lot in that defensive back room. He gives them a test every week. He makes sure that they have to know all the responsibilities at safety and corner. He'll switch them up at any moment in time. And the way he talks about Marquis Buford is like one of the star pupils in their cornerback classroom, and that's a great sign going forward.
Tommy Hill looks a lot like Cam Taylor-Britt. Having seen him now in person, he looks a lot like him in terms of, I mean physically. He's sort of a bigger, stocky guy, right? Like Cam is a built 200 pounds, right? So similar frames. Tommy Hill's got a similar frame, 200 pounds, sort of physically built, physical, can get inside the pads of guys. I think they got a guy that's very similar to Cam Taylor-Britt in terms of his sort of what he brings to the table. When you look at Quentin Newsome, he's taller, wiry, comes down and tackles really well, but maybe a little bit different of a coverage guy, whereas I think Hill is very similar to Taylor-Britt in that he's physical and he's built, could probably play safety, but plays corner and plays a physical corner, and is probably pretty fast. I kind of liked him. I think he's probably going to be the starter over there, although Braxton Clark is close, and then Chancellor Brewington was hurt. Last pick, Hunter Anthony for Evan. He didn't play bad.
He was all right.
Yeah, but he also wasn't playing Garrett Nelson. Gabe Irvin, injured. That's going to be a hard... Now, I'll tell you what, if I'm Gabe Irvin and I watch what those three guys did in camp, I have to be really prepared to have an incredible summer because it's going to be hard to catch Grant, Yant, and Johnson. That's just my opinion. I don't know that Irvin was I think Irvin is probably maybe the fourth or the third most talented in that group, and Johnson's got 4 years in the system, and he's pretty sure.
To be fair, Irvin was better than Yant and Johnson last year when he was healthy. I mean,
he was better in the sense that Yant was in a...
He was still settling in.
I think the idea that a true freshman...
Clearly Yant is the most talented. I mean, he's really talented. It's a weight issue, and does he know the playback issue?
Yeah, the idea that...
But the talent is there.
No, I'm sure.
Because if the talent wasn't there, he wouldn't even be there based on the way that he played. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like if he was overweight and didn't know the playbook and he wasn't super talented, he wouldn't be there. You know that he's talented because of the other two things. And just the way he runs. I mean, that's a big man with light feet. And you don't see that many big men with light feet. And he can move. I like Yant a lot if he's right.
We look back at Gabe Irvin winning the starting job, quote unquote, last year. I mean, it was a rotating door, but he was the first guy on the field of the season. I think it says as much about the state of the rest of that room than it as much as it did about Gabe Irvin.
And that's fine, but I'm just saying the rest of that room is all very similar to what it was back then.
No, and there's things about Irvin's game that I think are good. He has a little bit of a Divine Ozigbo game. He's got some nice moves. I think he runs behind his pads. I think he's decent at accelerating through the hole. Yeah, I understand all that conversation they had last year, but they've had other running backs in Husker football history who are not good pass blockers, and they played because they could run. I think the pass blocking thing was often used as I don't even know. It doesn't matter now. What we didn't hear a lot about this spring when Applewhite talked was like, oh my God, they can't pick up a blitz. Irvin was pretty good at that, but I would just say this, that I don't know what the easy comp for Yant is, but he's not as good as Braylon Allen in the sense that Braylon Allen's got incredible front line speed. And he's not as good as the Jonathan Taylor, right?
Sure.
But there's qualities to his game that are similar to both. He's got moves and he's got some size, and he doesn't have the top end speed that Braylon Allen does, and he doesn't have the sixth sense that Jonathan Taylor did in kind of timing his way through a hole. But man, there's just a lot to like there. Mm-hmm. And Anthony Grant, they have not had a back like Anthony Grant in a long time. And I don't want to trot out names here, but Ken Clark comes to mind, or this kid hits a hole hard and he goes. And at the second level, they haven't had a back actually like him in quite some time. I'm not going to say Ahmad Green, but like he hits a hole hard, and then Johnson is clearly going to play a lot. Johnson is we know that Ramir Johnson is smart. So he knows the offense, and he's going to play a lot because he can catch the ball, and he plays hard when he's healthy. He gets hurt. But Ramir Johnson's going to play. So that puts Irvin in a tough spot, and obviously Marquis Stepp is on the outside looking in.
Right.
And then they're going to add A.J. Allen, and I'm telling you, that kid's got ability.
You see it every year. Freshmen break out of that position in college football.
He is an Aaron Green electric talent. And I don't know that I don't know that he's going to be a running back, but man, you might want to look at him as a returner. Like there's things that A.J. Allen brings to the table. So it's going to be an interesting group. It was an interesting spring. I wish we had seen more. I wish we had been able to go to a practice and seen more out of practice. That would have been helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, the running back. I just add the running back position is interesting to me because it seems like they all have specific sort of specialties. Yant's the big guy. Ramir Johnson's sort of the pass catcher and the straight line screamer. Grant's probably the shiftiest guy. So I guess when I think of Irvin's chances, I feel like his best option or path back to the field is because, in my opinion, he's maybe the most well-rounded. Pass blocker, run between the tackles, has some speed, can catch the ball. Like I just, it's interesting because Nebraska in the past has had rooms where the guys are all very similar, and it feels like they do have a variety of specialties now.
We'll see. He's going to have to get on his horse, so to speak. Anything jump out about recruiting?
Yeah. So, it was a huge weekend, right? Like the sidelines have been busy before, but it was especially notable this weekend. I thought. There were guys from the group of guys from Georgia in the 2023 class were on the north end zone up against the fence, which is kind of unusual. Usually you see guys on sort of that northwest corner along the sidelines, but a bunch of these guys, it was so full that they were off into actually the back of the end zone, and it was a kind of a fun weekend. The weather was great for it. You saw a lot of family and friends milling out. O'Shawn Mathis got the Kings treatment out there at center field with his brother and the coaches, and Jason Peter was out there talking to him. But like it felt like a lot of the other guys just kind of enjoyed being around each other. A bunch of these recruits were in town. By all accounts, it was a good weekend, a coordinated weekend on Nebraska's part, and how they devoted time to all these guys. And I think it's fair to say that Nebraska will eventually reap a number of commitments from this weekend. None to this point, but just the way that they laid it all out there, I think they really helped set a foundation, especially for that 2023 class moving forward.
If you had to pick a purpose for that spring game, I don't think it was necessary. It's partially for the fans. They invite the fans in, but it wasn't designed for the fans. It wasn't designed to learn a ton about the roster. It was designed to get the recruits in there and show them, hey, look, this. I think you can almost, because the spring game was so bleh, that's almost a recruiting tool still. Because look at the product we put out there. It was touch football. Look how many people still came to see it and stuck around for a while. That's a powerful vision for some of those kids. Even the basketball recruit that was in the transfer, Antonio Reeves, said, I'd never seen that many people there for a spring game. So that, if you had to pick a purpose for what the spring game was about this week, I think that's what it was. It was for the kids who will eventually play in it.
Sam, what do you think about their quarterback commit, William Watson? I know you got to speak with him briefly and kind of lay eyes on him for the first time.
I think he's, 6 foot, close to it. That's helpful. He's not 5'8". You always wonder a little bit how that's going to look. I think he's a personable guy. Has a quality about him. It's a tricky deal there with him there, and he's committed, but he's not signed. And then Dylan Raiola's there, and I think there's an impression that Dylan's a year away from a commit, maybe more. I don't know. He could take that out for a while. And so on the one hand, you got a guy that's committed and said he's coming, and then you got this other guy who's the son of, one of the great offensive linemen in school history, and the nephew of an offensive line coach, and how much attention do you apportion each one? And Dylan's been there a bunch of times, and Watson hasn't. So I think you have to be mindful of that. We'll see. I think the thing they probably like about Watson is his accuracy and his poise in the pocket. And in fact, he's been a big-time player where he's been at. And, a likable kid. Probably will get bigger physically, in terms of how much he weighs, but I think is tall enough to get it done at this level. There are tall quarterbacks certainly in college football. I wouldn't describe Casey Thompson as tall. I wouldn't describe Chubba Purdy as tall, although he's taller than Casey Thompson.
A little bit, yep.
He's 6'2". And I wouldn't. There's just guys that you describe as tall and guys that you don't. And Watson's not one of those guys, but he can throw a ball. He really can. He's a good thrower of the football, and he can throw the ball all over the place and knows where to throw it and all those things. So we'll have more on him as we go on. Certainly he isn't the big guy that Dylan Raiola is. Raiola is such an interesting thrower because he has the ability. He throws like a baseball player, right?
Yep.
So he's a catcher, but he throws like a baseball player. He's a baseball player's delivery, very free, very very pretty, longish. It's not real tight. Chubba's is tight, right up here, kind of like a coil, whereas Raiola's bringing it back and fluid motion. And so he can throw almost any kind of pass you'd ever want him to throw. I mean, he can throw it. He's got an incredible arm. And then it just becomes you got to tighten those things up. And once you get in the battle, you have to learn how to throw the ball, on time and accurately. But Raiola is a unique passer. And I don't like using Patrick Mahomes as a comp to anybody because I think Mahomes is his own guy. And the way he does it is different. And he's also blessed to have the best offensive mind in the NFL to work with. And I don't know that Patrick would be as good if he was playing for my Bears as he would be playing for Andy Reid's Chiefs. It's just different. So I don't like using that as a comp. I would actually say that Raiola has comps to, Carson Palmer, Tom Brady. Like he throws the ball with torque and motion and really pretty. He has more comps to guys like that. 6'3", sturdy, beautiful throwers of the football versus, Patrick Mahomes, balletic, kinetic thing that he does, which is almost unique to him. Mm-hmm. People do this a lot where they say Mahomes this. If you watch Patrick for like a game or a whole season, he is actually doing it different than most people. So I would say, Dylan's more like Josh Allen, for example, who I think incidentally is just as talented as Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. He's more like that than he is like a 6'1" Mahomes, running around like a shortstop.
Maybe the last thing on football, and you kind of wrote to this a little bit too, Sam, but what's the next? Obviously, Ireland's late August, the season gets going. What's sort of some of the markings of these next few months for Nebraska football?
O'Shawn Mathis has to make a decision at the end of the month. Nebraska needs him. He looked the part when he was there. You've written about him. I think you feel like Nebraska's going to have a very good chance of getting him. But
I do.
We'll see. He may have another visit in him.
Yeah,
you never know. He's not making his decision this week. He's making it at the end of the month. So we'll see. Maybe there's another visit to come. They've got to decide who they want in the transfer portal and how to pursue them. They have to shed players. Scholarship players. You can do that one of two ways. You can either sever the 1-year continuous agreements that you have with some of these former walk-ons and hope they get on NIL money, or you can basically tell a guy and hope he leaves. Because it's hard. So I suspect it'll be more the latter than the former. But again, with the NIL money, it's tricky. You can get the financial equivalent of a scholarship without actually being on scholarship. But they got to get down to 85. Right now they're at 89. Let's say they add 2. I think they'll add 2. Then they got to get back. And then if DeAndre Jackson decides to come.
So you're talking 6 or 7 guys that would need to leave to to make that room.
They have to decide what they're going to do with DeAndre Jackson. He still intends to come. I talked to him yesterday. He still plans on coming to Nebraska. They got to decide what they're going to do with Xavier Betts. Does Betts come back? Does Frost want him back? Again, this is like a big-time transfer. That's the way to look at that. It's not, well, this is some guy that left the team. It's more like this is a guy that can help your football team win a lot of games, so they'll have to figure that out. Camps. They have 5 commits now. Won't surprise me if they double that by the end of June. I'm curious to see how Vince Guinta handles the camps. We didn't talk a ton about him, but I'm curious to see how that goes. Whether they turn it back into what Mike Riley had it, which was a lot of fun, and what it became under Frost was, another one of these. Like, it just, the energy, enthusiasm of them got turned way down with Frost and his former director of ops. So we'll see if that enthusiasm level gets turned back up, which I think would be good. And then I'm sure they'll have a chicken dinner circuit, some sort of Husker tour in June. And Big Ten Media Days in late July. Camp starts end of July. Team leaves for Ireland August, 22nd, 23rd. There's just not much time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hope and pray you beat Northwestern. I think you can be as good as you want to be going into that game, and you're still going to be clicking your heels a little bit and just going, please let us win this game. Like, that's what it'll be. Like, you won't know till you get there and what the week is like, and then it's going to be a night game in Ireland. It'll be a day game here. So it'll be like 11 a.m. kick.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like a 6 p.m. kick there, maybe noon here, 6 or 7 there. And you're just going to have to hope that your team plays like it belongs.
Yeah,
We'll not know until that game is played.
Yep, Illinois vibes.
No
the way
question.
They lost last year.
Only
Set the tone for
accentuated
the
because
season.
how will you know? How will you know until you get on the field at Ireland how it's going to feel? The crowd's not going to have any. Much of the crowd is going to be Nebraska faithful, or it's going to be people who have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And you just won't know until you get there and you feel it, and you feel like your team. And then you got to come out and run the stupid ball. You can't. You got to come out and be who you want to be. You can't wait and say, well, we're going to hold a lot of stuff back for Oklahoma. So you can't. You just got to be who you want to be and be that team and not be cute and win at all costs. It's the most important game of the season. If they win that, then I think maybe they win a couple more and then they get to Oklahoma and everybody's fired up and shoulders are shimmying. But if you lose that game, it's just, oh my God, are you kidding me? We went all the way over there and they lost that game. That kind of thing. So that's part of it. Let's move to baseball.
Sure.
Shall we? Why is the team so bad? And I mean, let's be clear. This is bad.
It is bad.
It's bad, right? Like, this is, 1-2 against UNO is bad. Getting swept by Rutgers and losing 19-1 on Sunday and the worst loss in 30 years is bad. Now, you don't have to say that, but I'll say it. This is bad. They're 12-18. They're not good.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even mediocre. They're bad. Why?
I mean, all the reasons. The defense has not been good. Even Sunday, I think they had one error in the game, but there were misplays in every outfield spot, both middle infield spots that continued innings. And so it's that. It's injuries on the pitching side. 1 or 2 weekend starters are out for sure. 3 or 4 of your top relievers are shelved with various injuries. So you're putting young guys in spots that they're not ready for, which we saw Sunday.
Got it.
And offensively, it's just been bad. There's 300 Division I baseball teams. Nebraska's outside the top 200 as a scoring offense. And you break it down, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, they don't hit for power. Mm-hmm. They're not getting on base. When they do get guys on base, they're not getting the clutch hits. I mean, they're hitting, I think in this losing streak, they're hitting right around 100 with runners in scoring position. And sometimes it's to the point where it's not even, forget about the hits, put the ball in play. Runners at the corners with 1 out, they strike out and then fly out to end the inning. So, there have been multiple times when Nebraska could have tied the game late or maybe been in position to win. All they got to do is put the ball in play. Weak infield grounder fly ball to left, whatever, and they haven't been able to do it. And so I've been thinking, and I wrote a little bit about this today, but this
You wrote a great piece today about the pitching.
Yes, this season in some ways reminds me of 2018. In 2018, for people who forgot about that season, and I wouldn't blame you, they were so ravaged by injuries pitching on the pitching side that they finished below 500. It was their worst season by winning percentage of the 21st century. The ERA was bad, but that team had a good offense. I mean, they could still score, and so they were right around 500 still. I think they finished 24 and 28 that year. This team has comparable, very similar injuries in terms of pitching to what that team had. The difference is this team can't score, and so the margin for error is razor thin, and that's why I think this week in particular could get ugly if guys don't step up. I mean, assuming this Creighton game gets played with the weather tonight, BYU is in here for 4. You're talking 5 games in 5 days for a team that's been struggling to fill pitching out for a 3-game weekend. And now you're really digging deep with some guys. And so, if you start talking about next year and the year beyond, as we saw in 2018, when you throw those guys to the fire, it can pay off down the road. But in the immediate future, they're in a tough spot because they don't have the pitching. The offense isn't going to bail them out, and the defense hasn't been consistent enough either.
With the exception of maybe the last couple of years of Mike Anderson, which I felt like was just an abdication of leadership on his behalf, I think it's very hard as a baseball manager and coach, harder than it is in football. I think there's things you can do in football as a coach that can affect change quickly, the plays that you call, the people that you play, all those things. It feels very hard to put a lot of this, and this isn't to be a Pollyanna, but it feels hard to put a lot of it on Bolt, other than to say they're a little young, and maybe they could have found a way to add a few older guys, but it doesn't feel like they're pushing the wrong buttons. When guys get hurt in baseball, they get hurt, and the reality is he did say, I think, on Sunday, well, they're going up there without a plan when they're going up to hit. Baseball is a very cerebral sport. It's probably the thinkingest of all of the sports because you really have to think about what you're doing when you're trying to hit a fastball going 93 miles an hour. What does he mean by that when they don't go up there with a plan? Obviously, they go up there wanting to hit the ball, but are they thinking through the sequence of pitches that they're about to see? Is that what he means by that?
Yeah, it's kind of like you're somewhere caught in the middle. Like their approach, generally speaking, is to hunt the fastball, as they say, so you're timed up for that. And then if you get an off-speed pitch where you like it, you're not going to miss that because you're timed up for something quicker. And so they feel like they're in a spot where, yeah, they're kind of looking for the fastball, but they're also sort of cheating and looking for some off-speed stuff. And so they're, it's kind of the worst of both worlds. You're trying to be everything good, and you're not doing any of it particularly well. And so
I've heard a couple people who I think know the sport very well that feel like they've watched the games. They feel like the batter's a little keyed up,
tight,
a little tight.
Yep,
little bit over on their toes. That you gotta, does that sound right? That there's just a certain level of tightness up there, and they're not relaxing.
I think I've seen that. Yeah, but it surprised me how bad the offense is because Bolt's staff has a reputation for really defining roles well for players. And we saw it to great success last year. I mean, Luke Roscom was a guy who was a chronic tinkerer of his mechanics. The staff simplified things for him last year. They said, just hit the ball up the middle. Try to hit the ball to the big part of the field, and he had a great season. Jackson Hallmark was a guy who kind of thought he was a power guy for a while. And then they told him last year, look, just bunt the ball, get on base, and use your speed. And so they focused in what they wanted those guys to do. That's worked really well for them the last couple of years. This year, it just, for whatever reason, hasn't sunk in with a lot of these guys who continue to try to do everything. Max Anderson, who was one of their better hitters last year, he kind of used a basketball metaphor and said, yeah, a lot of us are trying to play hero ball and hit the ball, hit the 3-run homer when nobody's on base. And so it's a young team. It's something they're still working through. The track record of the staff would say that they'll get there at some point. It might not be this year. But, yeah, it's just they have really struggled to sort of match up the game plan with the talent and what individual guys are best at doing.
That pitching thing is hard. When guys get hurt, It's just hard, because the guys can throw. If you're not ready for that environment, you can get shelled really quickly. Because in baseball, it happens real fast. Like when a team kind of smells that they can go after in a reliever, it doesn't take long. It just doesn't. Like nobody's going to give you. Nobody's backing off. It's hard to back off in baseball. Like it's hard. In football, you can do it. You can say, well, look, we're up by 28. We're starting the fourth quarter. Let's run the football, get it the hell out of here. Baseball, that's hard to do because you're not going to just watch strikes go by the plate.
Yeah.
And it can really douse the confidence of guys, because they might be throwing strikes and they're just getting shelled. So it's, I don't know. Like I've watched a lot. I've watched what I can either on BTN Plus. I haven't been to a lot of games this year, but it just feels like there's I don't know. The offense just isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing.
For what it's worth, especially on the pitching side, like this team overall, only one guy is out of eligibility after this year, and that's Dawson McCarville, one of the weekend guys right now. Everybody else, in theory, could return next year if they chose to do that. So there is a sense of sort of building to the future. And you look at the recruiting class coming in, I think it's 7 junior college players, most of whom are pitchers. So help is on the way as well. There's sort of, it's one of those things, if you're playing a video game, you might want to fast forward to this part and take your developed guys next year, but you got to go through it. And again, the defense and the lineup just aren't giving them a lot of margin for error. So I think it's going to be an uphill climb for them.
They got to make
the season
Big
only
Ten
halfway
tournament.
through.
That's huge. They cannot not
Top
make
8,
that here.
And the Big Ten's not very good.
No.
Minnesota is awful. Michigan State is awful. There are some bad teams. They already swept Ohio State. Yeah. So, I think they can still make the top 8 and get into that field, just if for no other reason than the league. It's probably going to be like a 2-bid league this year for the postseason.
Yeah. Felt like last year the league was really tough because a lot of guys had a bunch of guys back, including Nebraska. That was an old team, and it feels like it's fallen off a cliff. And you know what I'm interested? I'm interested to see if that happens in football too. Because the Big Ten football last year was hard as hell. There was a lot of teams that had a lot of old guys. They were hard to beat. Nebraska had some old guys. A lot of teams had a lot of old guys. Northwestern didn't. Right. Remember, Northwestern lost all of their old guys, and they were run through, right? And so I'll be curious to see if the level of the league goes way down this year, because what they were dealing with in the Big Ten West last year was a lot. I mean, Illinois was old. A lot of these teams have gotten a lot younger. Nebraska actually has gotten a little older. They just lost a lot of their old veteran players. So I'll be curious to see what happens with some of these teams. Minnesota stayed old. They brought a lot of guys back. Minnesota is going to be one of the favorites, so is Purdue. I don't think Wisconsin at this moment would be my Big Ten West favorite. I really don't.
They got younger, yeah.
They got younger, and I'm telling you, they're not as good. They're just not as good. The caliber of player in that program right now is not as good as the caliber of player in Minnesota's program. I just don't think they are. I think P.J. Fleck has out-recruited Paul Chryst. And I think Iowa, they're going to be pretty good, but this thing is wide open. And I think P.J. Fleck has inserted himself into this process by recruiting better football players. I just don't think Wisconsin's what they used to be. And I don't think they have an answer at quarterback either. I'd take Nebraska's guy, Casey Thompson, over Graham Mertz right now. And to be clear, they're not that much different from each other, except that Casey Thompson's thrown 22 touchdowns and Mertz hasn't come close.
Yeah, that's the perception thing we have to sort of come to grips with, is like it's a new quarterback for Nebraska, but this is a guy who's played major college football for a couple of years now. So the on-ramp process isn't nearly maybe what it feels like.
And I'd watch Illinois too, because they got a coach. And they've got maybe the best defensive coordinator that they've had in a long time there. Ryan Walters is a $1 million defensive coordinator. They're spending a lot of money to win football games at Illinois. Their athletic director was a former football player. They are not going to be easy. Brett Bielema can coach. And he struggled at Arkansas because he was playing Alabama and LSU and Auburn all the time. He ain't playing those teams anymore. It's going to be hard. This side of the league is going to be a bear for Scott Frost. But maybe he can win 6. Because when we say win 6, we're counting Illinois as a win, aren't we?
Sure.
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing that.
And probably Purdue. And maybe, yeah.
Why are we doing that?
Muscle memory.
No won.
Muscle memory.
They've won 2 in a row, and they won them. They dominated both games. Yeah. I can't wait for the season. I wish it were here.
That's the beauty of it. We're 4 months away. We're going to have a lot of
I'm
conversations.
excited about Illinois.
About this coming up.
It's
We're going
not
to talk Illinois and Purdue and all of your
I'm
favorite
excited
teams.
about it. I
Yeah.
love the Big Ten. No one else does but me.
It's going to be great. Spring is over. We have a lot of chewing on ideas to come in the weeks ahead, and we might take next week off, but we'll be back here soon after that.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. It's going to be a fun off season, fun season ahead. Thanks for sticking with us. Talk to you guys later.